Today's lesson is Lesson 17, the Louisiana Purchase. Today, when you picture the United States, a huge piece of land stretching from sea to shining sea probably comes to mind. But as the 19th century began, the country actually looked quite different. Spain, France, and England still held territory west of the Mississippi. Thomas Jefferson made westward expansion a top priority of his presidency and doubled the size of the young country in an 1803 deal called the Louisiana Purchase. As you will learn today, this move was more than merely adding territory. It paved the way for the United States to become a dominant power in North America by edging out European competitors. Did you know that when we name centuries, we actually call them 1 century ahead of what the number suggests? For example, the 1800s are called the 19th century. This is because the first century marks the time between 0 AD and 99 AD. AD stands for Annino Domini, which is Latin and means in the year of our Lord. This refers to Christ's birth. Although historians think Jesus was actually born in 4 BC, BC stands for before Christ and means just that, before Christ was born. When we name the centuries before Christ's birth, we have to go backwards. The first century BC is 0 to 99 years before Christ. The 2nd century BC happens that and is 100 to 199 years before Christ. Take a couple of minutes and quiz each other on the dates and centuries. One of you can say the name of the century while the other says the years it refers to. The Louisiana Territory was a vast frontier of 828,000 square miles. That spanned the area between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. The Louisiana Purchase was made up of what we call Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. It also included parts of Minnesota, Louisiana, New Mexico, South Dakota, Texas, Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. At the time, no one actually knew what all this land contained. The territory was so vast and largely unexplored that the borders were not clear. Strangely enough, the Louisiana Purchase was made without fully acknowledging where the borders were. They weren't made official until about 15 years later. After the Revolutionary War, the United States emerged as a dominant power in North America, but there were still European countries that hoped to expand their presence there. France, for one, had long dreamed of a nouvelle, new France in North America, similar to Britain's colonies along the East Coast. The Spanish, meanwhile, held control of much of the western North America. President Jefferson, with his passion for westward expansion, was already picturing his country stretching from coast to coast. He saw control of the Mississippi River as the next logical step. The Mississippi River and its port at the city of New Orleans was the linchpin. It held the answer to power in the West. The American settlers in the Louisiana Territory may have been new to the area, but they knew how to use the rich and diverse land. Forests were cut down to make way for crops, which led to a thriving timber industry. Animals were raised for meat, and wild animals were used by trappers and hunters for their valuable furs. All of these products were sold to eastern states, as well as other countries, but the difficulty was in transporting them there. Daniel Boone's Wilderness Road was an overland option, although the journey was treacherous and time-consuming. The easiest way to move these products down the Mississippi River on huge flatboats, boats with flat bottoms made for movement in shallow water, to the port of New Orleans. From there, ships could transport products almost anywhere in the world. Can you see now why control of that port was so important? With control of the port came control of nearly all the trade and shipping from throughout the Louisiana Territory. Settlers needed access to the river for their livelihood. Control of the Louisiana Territory had been in flux for a long time. The first known inhabitants were the indigenous peoples who lived there for many generations before European settlers arrived. If you remember, Indians had different ideas of land ownership, and Europeans arrived with a very different viewpoint. England, Spain, France, and the United States all had their own motives for desiring to control this Midwestern territory. However, it all revolved around increasing their power and limiting the power of their rivals. Let's take a closer look at the many changes in power that happened in this part of North America. We'll look at a timeline of the Louisiana Territory. In 800, the Indians occupied the Mississippi River Valley, the Mississippians. Between 1200 and 1500, indigenous people groups lived in and around the Mississippi River. The Sauk, the Fox, the Minope, the Illinois, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and many other tribes. In the early 1500s, Spaniards are the first European explorers to arrive, coming in search of gold. In the 1682, French explorers claim land in the Mississippi River Valley and name it Louisiana after King Louis XIV. 1754 to 1763, a conflict around French claim on the lands led to the French and Indian War. After the British victory, the territory is split between the British, the French, and the Spanish. As a thank you for their being allies in the war, the French give control of the port at Louisiana, New Orleans, to Spain. In 1783, after the Revolutionary War, the Treaty of Paris gives British territory to the new United States. In 1800 to 1802, New Orleans and Louisiana are returned to France by Spain. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase is finalized, giving control of all of the Louisiana Territory to the United States. It's hard to believe, but the initial Louisiana Purchase was made without the consent of President Jefferson or Congress. Robert Livingston, the American representative to France, who was seeking to purchase New Orleans, was taken aback when the French Foreign Minister, Charles Talleyrand, offered him the entire Louisiana Purchase. The problem was Livingston didn't have permission to make such a large purchase. Jefferson had only suggested he should offer up to $10 million for New Orleans and Florida. But after some negotiation, Livingston committed to paying $15 million for more than 800,000 square miles. You might wonder why he went $5 million over budget, but this was a deal he couldn't pass up. Time didn't allow for a letter to cross the ocean to Jefferson and await a response. He made the right decision. Jefferson was thrilled with the purchase, although he wasn't authorized to make the purchase either. Congress had to approve this purchase, which they did, but only by a narrow margin. In retrospect, we can see how this purchase placed the United States in the company of the most powerful countries in the world. But remember, they were a young nation and didn't have unlimited wealth. In 2021, that $15 million would equate to over $350 million in their day. Even taking this into consideration, the Louisiana Purchase is considered the greatest real estate deal of all time because of the dramatic effects it had on the growth and shaping of the United States. Just think about it. While the purchase of the Louisiana Territory was an important political step in the expansion of the United States, we must remember that this territory was not empty. Unfortunately, the purchase led to the forcible removal of countless Indians that call this area home and used it for their hunting and gathering grounds. Westward expansion had many negative effects, and we can't just gloss over them. To be good students of history, we must learn and understand these terrible events that are part of our history so we do not repeat them. Talk about this as a family and even take time to find more information about the people groups that lived in the Louisiana Territory and how westward expansion impacted them. A good place to start is Thomas Jefferson's Indian removal policy. It is easy to see why the United States would jump at this opportunity to expand the territory and establish themselves as the dominant power in North America. But the question remains, why was France willing to let go of this powerful stronghold and give up their dreams of the Nouvelle France? The answer was found in the word that has been so thematic in study, compromise. France's dictator Napoleon Bonaparte had money troubles of his own. Napoleon had other pursuits of power around the world, and he simply did not have the resources to maintain control in all the places he would have liked. Also, he wanted to maintain a friendly relationship with the United States. Napoleon understood that American expansion was inevitable, and he was forced to abandon his hope of a French empire in North America. The acquisition of the Louisiana Territory not only greatly expanded the size of the United States, it determined its position as a world power. While no one at the time understood just how significant this land deal would be, President Jefferson had a sense of the importance of expansion. He did everything in his power to encourage it. With the Louisiana Purchase, America ensured the safe export of their products through the port of the New Orleans and allowed for a continued settlement of the West. While European influence remained along the western edge of the continent, the Middle West now belonged to America. One more step in America's expansion from the sea to shining sea. Let's talk about it. If the Louisiana Territory area was never purchased by the United States, how would that affect the country today? How would the United States be different today if it still consisted of only the 13 states? Do you think the amount of land that makes up the U.S. today contributes to the power or influence? And that concludes our lesson 17 for the day.